Well, hello everybody. Will you still hang around, and will we still get to see you a little bit after this is done today? What an amazing session. I just want to go over some of the highlights. Honestly, when I ran with a bold agenda, including a lot of things we'll talk about today, and we laid them out, I couldn't be more thrilled that we got so many things done just in these last 4 months. So obviously, as you know, two main areas in education. Have you heard us talk about full-day kindergarten ever?
No, it's not.
Yeah. So it's this novel idea we had where kids ought to be able to go to a full day instead of just half day without parents having to pay. Not only is this important for kids to have a strong start, it's important for working families because the cost, $300 to $400 a month, takes away money from rent, from other investments, and it also frees parents up to work, go back to work if they choose. So we got it done. Free full-day kindergarten starts this fall. And that's what's so exciting is that, a lot of people look at this thing called government and they think, oh, it takes forever, and maybe they pass kindergarten and 3 years later we have it. This is this August, folks. Kids going back to school this August will have it. I mean, I talked to a parent online on Facebook just the other day, a mom who said, does that mean I get the $600 deposit that I put in for my kid to have full-day kindergarten back? I said, it should. Check with your school. She did. They got it back, and she's starting a college savings account with that $600, a nice nest egg to start for a becoming 5-year-old. Not only did we get the full-day kindergarten done, but we also got the one-time implementation funds done. So that was moved over to the BEST program, and that'll be about $25 million that is moving out to help districts implement full-day kindergarten successfully this fall. And those checks will be going out just in the next couple of months. So we're extremely excited about that. We also have 5,100 additional preschool slots for low-income families in Colorado. Again, making sure that kids from immigrant backgrounds, low-income backgrounds, don't start out behind families that can afford preschool for their kids. I would add that there's also really something in it for all families. I mean, if you have a family and you can afford preschool and kindergarten, it makes a big difference that your kid is in first grade with kids that the teacher doesn't have to try to catch up. They're already there. The class as a whole can move ahead. 5,100 additional preschool slots. We froze our tuitions at our institutions of higher education. So CU and CSU tuition will be flat. We know we need to do more. We're working on some of those cost drivers of tuition, but we're very excited that for the first time in recent time, those tuitions will remain flat. And then, of course, we also had a few programs that we worked with legislative champions to pioneer, including investing in dual and concurrent enrollment and 9th grade success. And real briefly, dual and concurrent enrollment are the programs that allow high schoolers to get transferable college credit and even an associate's degree while they're in high school. It's really amazing because it keeps kids in school because it gives them something relevant to learn, helps them graduate either with an associate's degree or maybe a year's worth of credit. So if they go on to a 4-year, they only need 3 years to graduate. If they go on to a community college, they might only need a semester or a year to get to their associate's degree, all at no cost to them. And then the 9th grade success is really our data-driven dropout prevention model. And it's targeted towards high schools that have the highest dropout rate in the state. And again, what the data shows is that students that are likely to drop out in 11th and 12th grade are already behind on credits in 9th and 10th grade. So this really focuses on the 8th, 9th grade transition and make sure that kids are able to start high school and stay on track to graduate. And we really expect that this will have a big impact on some of the highest dropout schools in the state. We want to thank our legislative champions in all of these areas, of course, on full-day kindergarten. In particular, shout out to Jim Wilson, Barb McLaughlin, and Jeff Bridges. Really amazing champions for kids. Jim Wilson was, I think, the very first legislative call that I made after I was elected. And I said, Jim, we're ready to work on full-day kindergarten with you. Thank you for your leadership. And with his leadership and Barb McLaughlin's and Jeff Bridges, not only were we able to get it done, but we were able to really get it done in a way that united Democrats and Republicans around a really important priority for kids, one of the biggest achievements of this session. The other focus, have you ever heard us say save people money on health care? That's another one. Yeah, you're hearing for the first time about kindergarten and saving people money on health care. So what that one means is we quite literally, Marianne, want to save you money on health care. That means we want you to pay less because you're getting ripped off. Joe, are you getting ripped off on health care? You are, because you're an American, and Americans are getting ripped off on health care, and Coloradans are getting ripped off on health care every day. So we had our, do we have our roadmap here? Where'd that go? Okay, there's our roadmap. We'll pull that up here too. We announced that a little while ago. We actually got all of it done. So we're going to have to figure out what else there is to do next session. There's plenty else for us to do off session because everything that passed requires a lot of implementation work, and much of this is in the administration's hands. So kindergarten, that's in the school district's hands. We do the one-time help through BAST. We want to get them up and running and help expand best practices. This stuff really is HCPF, it's Division of Insurance. We've been talking about what that means to roll these out successfully as they've made their way through the legislative process. So again, first and foremost, we're very excited this came together, establishing a reinsurance pool for high-cost cases to prevent them from driving up rates for the rest of us. What this very simply means is that because this bill passed, and of course subject to getting the waiver that we need from Washington, this will allow for immediate reductions in the individual market in the very next pricing period. And when we put pen to paper, we'll know exactly what those are, but they should be around the 20% range for higher priced areas. That's Western Colorado, at least 10% in the Denver metro area. It really depends on what region people live. But there's not an area in Colorado where rates won't go down significantly because of reinsurance in the individual market. The individual market is the most price-sensitive market, right? So it's about 8 or 9% of Coloradans get their insurance there. Not 89, 8 or 9. Many Coloradans, of course, have employer-based health care. Some have Medicare. Some have Medicaid. But the most price-sensitive group are those who literally pay for their own insurance because they don't get it from work, they're not over 65, they're not low income enough to have Medicaid. And so that's folks who are making, could be 40, 50, 80, 90,000 a year, but they're self-employed or they don't get it through work. So they are folks who are very price sensitive in the sense that they can afford it or they don't. And with these reductions in rates, particularly in Western Colorado, we fully expect that, of course, people want to be insured, and if it costs less, we will absolutely make a dent in the number of uninsured Coloradans. More Coloradans will be able to afford insurance and therefore access because of this. I want to really give a shout out to the tenacity of our amazing legislative champion, Julie McCluskey from Summit County, as well as Kerry Donovan and Bob Rankin for this critical bipartisan success with regard to reinsurance. We also already signed the hospital price transparency bill. This will, of course, allow markets to function better in the world of healthcare with regard to reporting from hospitals, a big source of cost. Negotiate to drive down the cost of health insurance. We had a bill that really allowed for models like the Summit County Alliance, pioneered by our insurance commissioner, Mike Conway, and the Summit County commissioners around finding a way to basically return the leverage to those who are being covered and effectively find a way through the Peak Alliance in Summit County and other models that we would have public employers like counties and school districts, private employers, could be small businesses, could be medium to large businesses, being able to negotiate with providers for better rates, reflecting in better insurance rates. In addition, additional choices for Coloradans with the passage of the bill that allows for a co-op or public option on the exchange. Again, a not-for-profit option that will enable more Coloradans to have choice in their carrier. There's a lot of markets where the lack of insurers prevents choice from driving down rates. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs, we are very excited that the prescription drug importation bill that you probably heard us talk about before made it across the finish line, also requiring a federal waiver. I've talked with the governor of Florida that passed a similar bill and will be requesting a similar waiver. He's a former colleague of mine in Congress, Governor DeSantis. And we are optimistic, based on a widely reported conversation that he had with President Trump, that the Trump administration is going to be willing to consider waivers in this area, and Colorado will be among the very first states to apply for that, hopefully successfully. Reduce out-of-pocket costs. We made great progress around out-of-network surprise billing, an issue that has plagued many Coloradans, where people don't know that urgent care centers and other areas they go for care are not in their network. People show up, they get care, and all of a sudden there's a $3,000 bill or a $10,000 bill, and their insurer is not on the hook for it. So we made great progress on cracking down on some of these anti-consumer unfair practices. And finally, new investments in primary care, mental health, and substance abuse. Several opioid bills. We convened on the executive side our task force around behavioral health, and we passed a very important primary care bill and children's behavioral health bill. Primary care is a part of saving people money on health care, because what you find is when people have that first interface, the early diagnosis, the ongoing care, it reduces costs significantly in the long term and results in significantly better health outcomes. One more on prescription drugs, the insulin bill, which I strongly support. Representative Roberts, Donovan, and Priola also will shortly be signed into law. So we have a lot of work cut out for us after session, a lot of things to implement, but we are very excited by Republicans and Democrats in the legislature stepping up to accomplish a lot of these priorities that I ran on and that we now will be focused on delivering on with the right legislation in place. We'd be happy to take some questions. Joe.
You also didn't get some things accomplished. The vaping and nicotine tax failed last night. You're a supporter of paid family leave. It didn't exactly come to fruition the way that many people thought it might. What's your thoughts on stuff that you didn't get through, specifically the nicotine tax that failed yesterday?
Well, of course, no legislature will solve every problem of the state in only 4 months. I heard from a lot of Republicans and Democrats that share my concern about our high teenage vaping rate. Not only high, actually the highest in the nation. Colorado, in an area where we don't want to be a leader, has the highest underage vaping rate in the nation. I look forward to working with Democrats and Republicans to make progress on that issue. And of course, we're going to look at what we can do administratively with the authority we have on that issue as well. We also look forward to continuing our efforts to cut the income tax, one of the areas that we included in our State of the State address. Of course, there's going to be a lot of great work for next session as well, but we are very excited that we have a lot to go with in terms of our work in successfully implementing saving people money on health care and free kindergarten and additional preschool slots, as well as our other education initiatives. Well, I'm optimistic about paid family leave. There's a process that's put in place by a bill that I intend to sign that will be around the table, making sure that we develop a program that will be actuarially sound and is something that I think can be celebrated as a win by both the workers and the business community. Well, again, I'm excited by everything that we got done. You know, there's obviously a lot to do in future sessions or special sessions, but you know, there's no plans at this point.
Any plans, or have you been having conversations with Republicans in the congressional delegation about some of these waivers you're going to use for, and how are those conversations going?
During the process of negotiating reinsurance and prescription drug importation, I talked repeatedly to Senator Gardner, and we also talked repeatedly to the CMS Administrator, Seema Verma. And so we've been very engaged with the administration throughout the informative process of both of these bills to maximize our chances to be successfully granted a waiver.
Do you think that Governor DeSantis asking as a Trump supporter helps you?
Yes. No, what helps is that if we have a blue state and a red state going in with a very similar request, one that the president has committed to work with Governor DeSantis on, we're very hopeful that both would be given under the same lens. And so, yes, it absolutely helps that a Republican state is requesting a nearly identical waiver and has a governor with a close relationship with the president.
Anything you're considering vetoing?
Well, there's over 300 bills that they've just passed, many in the last couple of days, so we're going to look forward to reading all of those bills. But obviously, we've been focused on getting the big things done that I said I would do when I ran for governor.
Will you actively campaign for sports betting? Heading your way, I expect you to sign it.
I'm supportive of enabling the sports gaming industry to create jobs and thrive in our state, and you know, I am supportive of those efforts.
Governor, what's something that you didn't expect in your conversations with trying to get most of what you wanted done upstairs? What's something you didn't expect in those conversations that didn't go your way?
Well, look, I mean, a lot of these are the results of, you know, real serious negotiations between people of goodwill. When legislators had ideas that we didn't love, we wanted to engage them. We tried to work on them to improve their bills. And I'm excited that on many priorities that weren't necessarily my priorities, but were priorities of one of the 100 people upstairs or more, we tried to work with them in a way where this could be a win for the state and improve. So we were excited to engage intellectually on a policy perspective with many legislators in both parties to help make their ideas wins for the state and get to a place where they could pass and ultimately be signed.
Do you have a message for the folks that are working on recalls right now? You met a fair number of them up in Fort Lauderdale last Friday. How do you reach out to those folks?
Well, look, I mean, our agenda is for all of Colorado. So, I mean, whether somebody voted for me or not, you know, their kids or grandkids will benefit from free full-day kindergarten. Whether they voted for me or not, their health care costs will go down. You know, once we have elections in this country and somebody's sworn in, and I'm honored to be the governor of the state of Colorado, I'm everybody's governor, whether they voted for me or not. And when people call our front desk or want to talk with me or show up at town halls, we're always civil and listen to all different perspectives. And we never ask what party someone is or whether they voted for me or whether they support me.
Will you campaign for the debrucing measure for transportation and education, and will you make any other steps in the off session to look at long-term transportation funding solutions?
Well, I'm supportive of those efforts, as you know as well. I think what it's important to work with is a strong bipartisan coalition around improving the governance of our state and increasing fiscal flexibility without raising taxes. So I'm supportive of those efforts. What was your second question? Yeah, we are continuing our efforts around fiscal reform in this state. That means it's not the 2019 ballot, as you know. These are efforts that we are convening with our chief fiscal strategist, Kerry Kennedy. We've had 4 or 5 stakeholder meetings at the governor's mansion, Republicans, Democrats, people from all parts of our state, folks who care about transportation and infrastructure, the business community, education community, higher ed, all folks kind of at the table with the common goal of how do we make our state more governable. And we're looking forward to continuing those efforts over summer. In fact, I think the next meeting of that group is coming up in the next few weeks. What?
Can you get the revenue you need? I mean, you know, we had a great year for education. We still have a $500 million negative factor of transportation. Can you get the money you need for the long term without raising taxes?
Well, again, our goal is to reduce the income tax rate, and to be clear, that's a revenue neutral proposal is what we are proposing. We believe it's revenue positive in the long run because a more efficient and lower tax code leads to increased growth. But in the short term, it would be revenue neutral. By eliminating subsidies and loopholes, we can instead allow families to keep more of their money.
They called it the off season. As we approach 2020, do you see yourself being very active? What is
Yeah,
the goal is going to be in a 2020 active Democratic presidential primary?
So
It's a big player nationwide.
So it's not the off season for a governor. The legislature leaves. We're left with all of this and more to implement. So this means I'll be engaged with our cabinet. I'll be working at the agencies. I've already had town halls at 6 or 7 of our agencies. Our goal is to get to every agency to listen to line level employees by fall, which we will do, and really make sure we have a strategy and goals in place at each agency. We have a terrific cabinet. In the first time in the history of Colorado, majority of women in our cabinet, really representing the diversity of our state. And so really the governor's work just begins. I mean, the governor has a role in the lawmaking process, namely signing bills, but we now have a lot of work to do to implement them. You asked about the political. My focus is not political. I'm excited to have recently announced that we'd be holding our primary on Super Tuesday. What that means is we hope that candidates running for the presidency on both sides of the aisle will be visiting Colorado, will be spending time here. Any candidate who calls me, I'll be encouraging them to listen to the voice of Coloradans.
Governor, do you intend to sign House Bill 1266, the bill that allows parolees to vote, and then more generally how far do you think the state should or shouldn't go as far as voting rights for incarcerated?
So again, there's over 300 bills, and so I'm not going to be going bill by bill tonight. We're talking about kind of what we got done, and we're happy to, you know, I think we'll be happy to talk specifically about that issue with you sometime. So. Well, you know, again, I think that when you've paid your price to society and you're able to participate, this I already signed a bill, ban the box this session, that's consistent with my general philosophy, that at least on the initial questionnaire, you're not allowed to ask about certain questions that are, might be valid later in the hiring process, but the problem is many people were locked out of the hiring process from the get-go. Again, on specific bills, there's plenty of time for that. That's not our focus today. I'm not even entirely sure what they just are finishing passing up there. Those haven't gotten to us yet. They need to be enrolled, but there'll be plenty of time for that.
Real quick,
Mhm.
Larry, the other week you said that you signed some bills that you don't like.
Oh, yeah.
What are those?
Oh, you want to know the bills I don't like that I signed, that I feel bad? Can I talk about the bills that I like when I sign? Let me give you a couple that I was really excited about.
We go to all those bill signings. I'm worried about
No, you don't know how excited I am when I smile, and you just don't know whether I'm really excited or not. I was excited about the lemonade bill that removes barriers for minors to start their own businesses. As somebody who had a tomato stand as a minor, and if I violated any laws, the statute of limitations has long expired. I'm glad that we removed barriers for future entrepreneurs. I was excited about the roadside stand bill that removes barriers for counties for zoning roadside stands, again, streamlining it and making it easier for farmers to sell their produce on the roadside stand. I value that as a consumer. Yes, it's a benefit to the farmers and people who grow it, also for consumers. Those are two that I just, they really added an extra kick to my step that I got to sign them, and I was really excited about that. Obviously, everything here that I mentioned, I will be very excited about. Signing full-day kindergarten will be a very special day for our state, really a moment that will create a positive legacy moving forward for all families in Colorado by really ensuring that kids have access to great early childhood education, allowing parents to choose to re-enter the workforce sooner, allowing parents to save for college or retirement or invest in a business. So I'm very, very excited about that as well. There's some of those. Yeah, I don't want to offend the legislative champions. I respect their prerogative. They're representing their districts. I get that. They made it through their process, and I'm not going to rain on their parade, even though I don't love their work. And there's only a few of those. I was commenting to my staff a week or two ago. I said, by and large, the legislature is actually passing good bills. I would say that the quantity of bills that as a Coloradan, we should all be proud that are now the law, at least of the ones that reached me so far. I haven't seen these 200 more that might be coming. But, and I always take the time before I sign a bill to read it and get the summary on it. But overall, there's some good bills that came out of this session.
What did you learn throughout the session in terms of working with lawmakers that are so involved in terms of your Democratic colleagues, whether it's full-day kindergarten or immigration?
Well, I always have a saying, if anything in politics was easy, it would have been done already. And I knew that getting into it. If full-day kindergarten was easy, we would have had it decades ago. If reinsurance was easy, we would have had it years ago. If hospital pricing transparency, I think that one came a couple times before it passed. So none of this was supposed to be easy. None of it was easy. I'm really proud that our legislators stepped up and got the important things done to save people money on health care and make sure that every child has access to a great education. Say two more.
Governor, what steps did you take this session to help come up with a funding source for the Colorado Water Plan?
So that's tied to the sports gaming, which I think somebody asked about earlier. I also recommended $30 million of general funding for the Colorado Water Plan. The state, the JBC and the legislature, I believe, cut that back to $10 million, if I'm not mistaken. The dedicated funding source vehicle would potentially be the sports gaming initiative that's moving forward this November. It's not, no, but it's great. But there is no dedicated funding source today, and we'll be in a better place if there is a dedicated funding source.
What are you looking at for a funding source that will raise I think there's like $3 billion that the state is supposed to, at least $3 billion that the state is supposed to come up with on this.
On the water plan over time? Yeah, again, we made the important step this year that we said it's appropriate to use general fund money for water infrastructure. And I'm glad that made it all the way through the process, not as much as I would have liked, but even the $10 million is an important precedent. The hopeful passage of the sports gaming initiative will provide a dedicated funding source. And one thing to keep in mind is when you have a dedicated funding source, we're talking, hypothetically here, if sports gaming were to pass. When you have a dedicated funding source, you also have a funding source that's bondable. Now, that might not be bondable in the first year or two because the revenues might not be as predictable, but once we see what those revenues are, that's potentially a funding source that you can then bond for capital, which is the traditional approach to capital. So I wouldn't look at it as, it's only X dollars per year from this dedicated funding source. Once that becomes predictable, it can be 20X or 15X or 25X because it becomes a bondable source, which is, of course, completely appropriate for something like water infrastructure or roads. Again, thank you. And we're going to be traveling across the state. I'm in Pueblo and Colorado Springs tomorrow. I'll be in Grand Junction next week. We are, just as I was during session, getting out to make sure that we listen to people on the ground all over the state. And what I hear is really a great commonality of what it means to be Coloradan. I hear people supporting and calling out for kindergarten across the state. College tuition affects every family who has a kid going to college. I don't think there's a family in Colorado that doesn't worry in some way about healthcare costs, whether it's their out-of-pocket on prescription drugs, whether it's their insurance premium, whether it's denial of coverage. Anybody who's been through any kind of health issue, and we all interface at some point with the healthcare system, we know that we can do better here in Colorado, because as we all know, there's only one thing that you can say to the God of death: not today. Come on, any Game of Thrones fans here? No one? Oh, come on. All right, watch Game of Thrones. Anyway, come on, no one? Not today. All right, thank you all. Maria will give you the logistics on the bill signing schedule. We'll look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.